Thank you so much for joining me here at the live desk. I am Janae Hancock. As you all know, here at KCTV5, we are still following the latest developments regarding the mass shootings that took place in Maine Wednesday night. I do want to turn back to that live shot we have coming straight out of Maine right now as they continue the manhunt for the suspected killer. That would be 40-year-old Robert Card. You can see some divers actually going into the water here, but he is suspected of killing 18 people and injuring 13 others. And, you know, CNN, they are sending in updates minute by minute of all of the victims that we know so far as they continue to identify them. And with all of that being said, I do want to turn things over to our guest for today. You were taking a look at Dr. Greg Nawalnik. He is a clinical psychologist at the University of Kansas Health System. And Doctor, I want to thank you so much for joining me here at the live desk. I think it's important that we kind of focus on a different angle here. We talk about the mass shooting and the updates that are coming in, but this is not the only mass shooting we've heard of. And as you continue to hear about mass shootings, there are so many different emotions like fear and anxiety and numbness. But I also want to touch on this, Doctor. We did hear that a 14-year-old, he is one of the victims that was unfortunately killed at a bowling alley where children were playing Wednesday night. And if I just want to ask you, you know, this is not normal. It's not normal for kids to grow up living this way. Is that right?
Correct. Yeah, it's not normal for anyone. You would hope that everyone could avoid these types of situations.
Sure. And I also want to touch on this quote that I do have here coming in from a 10-year-old that was just injured in that shooting at the bowling alley. She said, "I never thought I'd grow up and get a bullet in my leg. Why do people have to do this?" And, you know, kids, they also go through school trainings, unfortunately, where they have to prepare for an active shooter situation, and it's ultimately impacting their mental health. If you can just expand a little bit more on that.
Yeah, I mean, you know, this type of exposure to a situation like this is really difficult to try to process. It's difficult for an adult to try to process who has the breadth and depth of life experience. When you've got a child, you have to think they can't possibly make sense of what's occurred. And it really, having something like this occur earlier in life, it can set the individual up for a lot of deleterious psychological impacts and effects in terms of post-traumatic stress response, anxiety. We're seeing, you know, over the majority of of teens endorse when they go to large group events, they're planning exit routes just in case something should happen. So, I mean, this is something that with today's exposure in terms of social media and you know, the availability of online news clips. It's not like it was limited to after dinner or morning news. It's at any time somebody can find a video or a story about this and really do a deep dive. And so we're seeing unprecedented levels of this act being inserted into people's subconscious and altering the way in which people are engaging with one another, engaging in their life, and experiencing safety.
And, you know, you bring up a good point talking about social media, and as kids continue to scroll on TikTok and as they continue to scroll on their Instagram and everything else, how do parents protect their children who are going to see, you know, images of other kids that have unfortunately passed away or they have been injured and, you know, just still dealing with maybe those school shootings that may have happened in the past? How do parents protect their children?
So some of this it may sound a little naive, but I mean, we have to hope that there's age-appropriate application and use of technology. You know, for a 10-year-old to see a video of this, it's going to be a very different impact than a 17 or 18-year-old. Not to say the 17 or 18-year-old isn't going to be impacted. It's just different in terms of their understanding of death and dying and of people you know, who engage in acts of senseless or, you know, mass violence. And so we want to be, as parents, trying to educate and inform our children. When we give them that smartphone, when we turn loose some of the reins of social media, I think we have to approach it the same way we would if we gave them a power tool. You're not going to give a power tool to a child, you know, drill with a bunch of drill bits, you know, maybe paddle bits that can bore holes through wood and a really sharp point on it and say, here you go. You know, you really wanted it. Good luck. I hope you have a good time. Be careful. In the same way that we would educate the child around the use of something as dangerous as that, I think that's how we have to approach when we give a child a technological device that opens the gateways to the internet. We have to be sensible about worst case scenario. What can this thing do? What is this capable of? What am I actually inviting my child to see? And it can look like having conversations around the world, and that sensationalism and how that works in terms of the more that you click on certain things, the algorithm is going to be attracted to send you more of it. And so the more education, and sometimes that's going to require the parents to educate themselves first, because tech savviness tends to be more readily and easily adapted in terms of the youth than the older folks. So I think that parents need to educate themselves first about what are some of the safeguards, what are some of the restrictions that can be put in place, what might be an age-appropriate employment of these different technologies, these different platforms, so that we're providing as much protection. And then you also want to be aware, what is your kid seeing? Have conversations around, what did you see today online? You know, what did you visit? Anything funny? Anything that was scary? Anything concerning? And we really need to recognize that parents are always going to be that source of safety. They're going to be the place that we want our children to hear about these things from, to learn from, to be reassured by. And so I think it's up to parents to really try to do the best job they can in mitigating exposure and regulating the influence of social media on our children.
Yeah, it's definitely a sad reality that we all have to get used to. Are we seeing an increase in as far as anxiety and depression, not only in children, but adults as well?
Absolutely. I mean, every time that one of these happens, there's an afterglow that sort of shows up in terms of this nebulous response of people just having an increase in depressive or anxious symptoms. You know, when we have access to the different types of footage, and we have to also understand that we have right now a unique cascading effect of traumas in terms of, we still are seeing images from Ukraine. We're seeing images from the Gaza Strip in Israel and Palestine, and we're seeing, you know, the mass shooting here closer to home. We're seeing a lot more violence than we probably should or want to see. And it's important to recognize that just because something is prevalent in the news or is prevalent online, that doesn't, it's almost like it artificially increases in our subconscious the base rate of that behavior. Certainly, we don't want to minimize the impact of mass shootings, but this is something that accounts for around 1% of deaths a year. But it is something that, you know, at an exponential level, erodes at our sense of comfort, our sense of safety. And that's, you know, not surprising, because it is such a dramatic event. It is really big. It is very threatening. And it erodes, you know, that sense of just commonplace safety and security we have to go about, you know, bowling. I mean, this is not the place that you should expect. Like, if you're in Gaza, you have to understand that things could go south at any given moment. You wouldn't think the local bowling alley would hold that same threat potential, but yet here we are. And so I think we just have to recognize that, yes, this does have an impact. We are seeing increases in anxiety and depression around this, because it breeds hopelessness. We feel really sad. We feel really worried in the wake of events like this.
And you bring up that bowling alley. I do want to take a look at some aerial video that we do have here at the live desk. Touching on that again, that's where the mass shooting actually started. The mass shootings actually started Wednesday night in Maine at Youth Night for a Kids Bowling League. So again, we are waiting for law enforcement officials to release more developments, more details on all of the victims. But we do know that one 14-year-old has unfortunately passed away, and one 10-year-old was shot in the leg. Touching on that, what do you suggest that parents do as far as we move forward? Do they isolate themselves? Do they not go to events? Because you also mentioned the fact that, you know, you don't expect this to happen at a bowling alley. You don't expect it to happen at a movie theater. All of these family locations. Do you expect people to just stop going to public places like this, or just to be more aware?
I hope not. The reality is, again, that this is a low base rate occurrence behavior. Um, we really, I think that in fact it would be a clinical sign if people start avoiding activities and avoiding going places. We saw the impact of the avoidance and shutdown during the pandemic. We would be wise to learn the lessons taught then. Um, we need to continue to live our lives. I think that hypervigilance, I mean, vigilance is to be expected anywhere at any time. You have to keep your kind of head on a swivel, be alert to threats. Um, you know, uh, Children have been abducted from places like this for years. That's not something new. So you want to keep an eye on your kids and you want to be aware of the people around. Like you would want to notice the lecherous middle-aged guy that keeps staring at your child in a weird way. The only way you're going to notice that is if you're vigilant. You happen to be looking around and checking your surroundings. So we want to certainly continue doing that. But staying home, locking the doors, trying to avoid the boogeyman, there's a whole list of problems that can come with that as well. So I think that we want to try to find a happy medium where we're able to engage in our lives as safely as possible. If it looks like hiring, in places that host events like this, having security there on hand, just have somebody that has heads up and has an eye around what's going on, that could be helpful. But I certainly would discourage an absolute shutdown and ceasing of activities and engagement on the basis of this type of behavior.
Dr. Greg,
I think.
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah. Oh, no, go ahead.
No, I just wanted to say thank you so much for joining me here at the live desk. Is there anything else that you would like to add before I let you go here?
No, I think really it's just this is a tragic event, and I think it's something to try to alert us to the importance of taking action in our own homes in terms of awareness and preventive measures. And I think that we can take activist positions in our community to try to do what we can and try to mitigate the effects of this and try to prevent them in the future. But aside from that, this is a difficult thing to respond to. And I think that families connecting and communicating with one another and really addressing concerns and fears and being honest and expressing if you're noticing extreme hypervigilance and feeling like you can't go do things that you enjoyed before, it might be time to consult a professional and make sure that you're taking the best care of yourself that you can.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Doctor, for joining me here at the live desk. And I'm sure this is not the last time that we will be talking, unfortunately, but these conversations are timely and they're very important. So thank you again for taking the time to talk to me today.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Perfect. I am going to take another live look at this shot coming in from Maine right now. Law enforcement officials have been very active as that manhunt is still underway for 40-year-old Robert Card. Again, touching on those latest details, what we know so far right now ahead of our evening newscast, the deadliest mass shooting in the U.S. this year was in Maine Wednesday night, and it is the deadliest since the Uvalde school massacre. And at least 566 mass shootings have happened this year across the country. Now, Robert Card, he is 40 years old. He is facing arrest warrant for 8 counts of murder and should be considered very armed and dangerous as well. He is a certified firearms instructor and a member of the U.S. Army Reserves, police said, and his background could make the effort to find him both challenging and dangerous. Taking a look at this video we have coming in from the White House right now, President Joe Biden ordered flags to be lowered to half-staff for the next few days as a mark of respect for the victims of these senseless acts of violence.